Hello everyone, my name is Eduardo. I'm a partner solutions architect with AWS, and today I have here with me Mark Cassino from IBM. Hello, Mark.
Hi, I'm a product manager at IBM for watsonx.gov.
So, Mark, we are here today to talk about AI and governance, right? It's a big topic, right? Everybody's looking into how to develop AI-infused applications, generative AI use cases, but customers are reaching out to us and asking, hey, how can I make sure that my AI models, my generative AI models, are performing and behaving the way that I am expecting them to, right? And I don't fall into problems with whatever use cases I put it out there, right? So last year we released this integration between SageMaker and watsonx.governance, right? That helps customer address these concerns. Now, I wanted to talk to you today about what are some of the new features and new capabilities that we have brought into this integration.
Sure. Yeah. Starting with what we released last year, we've made enhancements to the existing kind of out-of-the-box workflows that come with the product. And by the way, this is all centered around this notion of an AI use case, which is really a business problem that a company is trying to use AI to solve. So if we look at this lifecycle diagram, it starts with that use case creation. The use case goes through its own approval process involving stakeholder approvals and risk and compliance assessments. And there's obviously the ability to reject use cases which may not be within the risk tolerance, or from a regulatory perspective may not be something that the business can pursue. But assuming everything goes according to plan, the use case can get approved and move on through to the development lifecycle. So, at this stage, you would start to involve technical personas. You can define a technical owner for the use case, and this would be the person who would initiate the model development. So once the technical owner gets involved, that tends to be where the actual models can start getting built, or whether it's a Gen AI prompt or a predictive machine learning model. That process kicks off after the use case is approved.
So once the use case is approved here, it's going to, as we are going to see later, it creates a model package, right, for the developers on SageMaker. And the data science team also gets some kind of notification saying, hey, you're ready to go, right? You can start working on developing this model, right?
Exactly. So the watsonx.governance helps to orchestrate that process. So once the use case is approved, that notification is configured to happen automatically, and the model package can get created. And that the creation of that package is also automated.
Now, if I'm looking at this from a compliance officer or a customer point of view, right? Can I, as part of this workflow, can I attach specific regulations or policies that my use case needs to follow, like the EU AI Act? And as I go through the approval, does that kind of give me the lens that the use case that I'm building needs to be compliant with specific regulations? How does that work from a workflow and from a watsonx point of view?
Yeah, good question. So that actually happens early on in the use case process that we see on the screen here. There's that risk and compliance assessment stage, and there's two kind of main activities that happen here. The risk side of it is where we have some out-of-the-box assessments that help to identify which risks may be applicable to the use case based on factors like what type of model is being used, what does the use case actually entail, questions about, is it externally facing, internally facing, and so on. And this kind of helps to create a risk profile for the use case. Okay. And then from a compliance perspective, similarly, there's an assessment that kicks off automatically where we can help to determine firstly if the use case is in scope for certain regulations such as the EU AI Act, and also something that we're working on is the ability to actually then, for the regulations that you're in scope for, have kind of a list of obligations to go through and evaluate them and determine if the use case is actually compliant with those regulations.
Okay, cool. Now, once this first stage of the workflow is done, what are some of the next steps that we jump into?
So really, the next key step of this use case approval process is the stakeholder review. And this is where parts of the business that have been designated as required to approve such a use case can all give their feedback on as to whether or not this use case can be approved. So an example might be that it might need to go for an AI ethics review if the company has an AI ethics board, for example, or regulatory compliance and legal might want to
Okay.
have a view here as well.
And if you identify early risks that could impact your use case, I suppose you need to come up with mitigation plans and things that you have to watch out for to avoid those risks, right?
Exactly, yeah. So the tool allows for controls to be linked to the risks to help mitigate them, and there's also the ability to document mitigation strategies for those risks.
Okay, cool.
So here we kind of go the next level down. Once the use case has been approved and model development begins, as we talked about, a model package gets created, and we'll talk a little bit more about the kind of model development side in a moment. But for now, I want to focus on the sort of governance side of model development. So as the model gets created, there's a governance record created of it as well, and for audit purposes, we want to be able to keep track of things like who's developing the model, what type of libraries and data sets they're using, if there are different versions of the model, being able to kind of keep track of the different versions. And this is kind of what we call experimentation. So rapidly iterating to try out new features and kind of improve the model before we're kind of at a stable point where we have sort of a pre-production model that we can properly validate. So once the experimentation is complete, we mark the model as ready for validation, and then a pre-prod deployment will be created in SageMaker, which can then be properly validated by the model validation team,
Okay.
who gives their recommendation when it's ready for production or if it needs to have some kind of remediation.
Okay, got it. So what that means is that you have different stages, and within those stages, you can have different status for the model, right? So
Yeah.
as you progress through development, test, QA, all the way into production, you can have different reviews at those stages, and you can have different status for each stage, like the model is under development, under review, rejected, approved, so that you can move the model between your MLOps pipeline, right?
Yeah.
And you mentioned that you need to review data from the model, right? So that's all part of the integration that we have with watsonx.governance and SageMaker, right? It's where you're fetching that metadata from the SageMaker model registry. And if you enrich the model information on watsonx.governance, that reflects back into SageMaker model registry, right? So that the data engineers and the data scientists can also see what's coming from the compliance side, right?
Exactly. So it's a two-way integration. So when approvals happen, yeah, the data scientists can be notified of all those changes.
Okay.
And then there's also then a history of kind of beginning to end all of the different tasks, who performed them, what was changed, and so on.
So really, if we look at how these different personas handle their day-to-day activities, it's not like the compliance officer needs now to become a SageMaker specialist and go into SageMaker, right? And likewise, the data scientists need to worry about, managing more information on watsonx. They're just going to sit on the tools that they're already familiarized with. It's just that this data exchange between watsonx.governance and SageMaker is going to help them visualize what these teams are doing, right? And send information back and forth between them, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. We don't want the business users to have to kind of go out of their comfort zone and do technical things, and vice versa for the technical people who may not have a good view on what it takes to comply with a certain regulation. So just being able to share information between those two user experiences is going to be key to making that easier.
And from a business point of view, what do you see is the big advantage that customers get from this, right? Like if I'm let's say on an insurance industry and I need to create a use case for fraud detection, what is it that this integration and what is it that I get from watsonx.governance that really helps me be sure that my models are going to behave at the level that I'm expected, and what kind of issues does it help me prevent, right?
Yeah, so it's kind of a many-fold answer to that. So, from a risk and regulatory perspective, the company can ensure that they're not exposed to, the things that can happen if a model fails or performs poorly. Not the least of which is a reputational impact, right? You sometimes hear about companies where a chatbot goes rogue and starts saying bad things, and it's hard for a company to recover from something like this if it makes it into the public.
Okay.
And then from a model development perspective, we are making it easier to kind of capture this metadata about the AI as it's being built. So this ensures better consistency, more transparency, and the ability for non-technical people to understand the training and the building of these machine learning and Gen AI models. And then lastly, from a continuous monitoring perspective, after the model is deployed, we continually monitor for different characteristics that can help us determine if the model is running well. And if things start to go badly, there's the ability to kind of notify the relevant stakeholders, kick off a change management process to fix the model and resolve the issues.
So it really is an end-to-end AI lifecycle compliance management and monitoring point of view, right? Because once the models are in production, right, they're out there exposed to the applications in the world. You need to keep track of how they're behaving in real time, right?
Exactly. You have to continuously monitor them.
Okay, and I believe that's part of the new feature that you're bringing on watsonx.governance on AWS, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's coming to AWS soon.
Okay, now let's take a look at this from the point of view of a data scientist and a data engineer. So this is a representation of this integration that we spoke about. Now, as you've mentioned, you are going to create the use cases on watsonx.governance. You're going to go through the approval workflows. And once the model is approved for development, we are going to see a new model package being created on SageMaker. watsonx.governance has the capability of integrating with 10 different centralized model registries, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a pattern that we recommend to customers, where we see here an AI/ML shared services account where we build this construct of the central model registry, right, for the governance part. So the way that we can then share these model registry and the model versions with different AWS accounts is through the AWS Resource Access Manager. So what's happening here is that as the workflow in watsonx.governance triggers the development process on SageMaker, the data scientists, they can go into their development account, they can do experimentation, they can use SageMaker Clarify to collect some metrics from the models, see how the models are behaving from drift, bias, and all the different metrics. And all the model metadata information and these metrics are going to be sent back to watsonx.governance, right?
Exactly, yeah. So again, from a version control perspective, you'll be able to see, what happened with our development models as we move to pre-production and then even eventually production. You can kind of keep track of the performance data for each version individually.
Okay, so once I have trained my model and I've identified a model candidate and I've registered that model, we get that metadata along with the all these metrics from the training jobs into watsonx.governance. So then we go through the workflow of approving and we say, all right, this model is ready to go into QA, right?
Yep.
So that's going to change the model stage and the model status, right?
Exactly.
And it's going to reflect back on SageMaker so that the ML engineers or the data science can trigger their pipelines to push the model into the next stage, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right. What happens, for example, if I already have a collection of models on model registry, right? I can also bring all my collection of models into watsonx, right?
That's right, yeah. It's all through the integration with the model registry. So it makes it very easy to add watsonx governance to an existing SageMaker account.
Okay. Now, the model can move, as we said, through different stages and different status, all the way into being approved to being deployed into production. And what we see here is then that model monitoring piece is what you said is coming to AWS now, right?
Yes.
Which is the ability to monitor how the model is performing in real time at an inference endpoint once deployed, right?
That's right. Once deployed and also during development time.
Okay, that's really cool. So watsonx.governance is available on the AWS Marketplace. And Mark, this is a fully managed offer by IBM, right?
That's right, yeah. So you just click a button and everything gets provisioned and you can start using it right away.
If you want to go into more details about the integration between watsonx.governance and Amazon SageMaker, we also have a blog published on this topic. You just need to follow the link here on the screen. So Mark, thank you very much for being here with us today.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it. See you all next time. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.